Move, this is my seat. Carolyn Reed's voice sliced through the first-class cabin as she physically shoved Serafina Hayes aside and dropped into seat 1A, waving off the boarding pass Serafina silently held out. Passengers turned. A flight attendant hesitated, and Carolyn, convinced by her own wealth and whiteness, doubled down. Serafina didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply stepped back, her expression unreadable, the kind of calm that should have terrified everyone. Because the woman Carolyn had just humiliated wasn't a confused passenger. She was the aerospace billionaire whose authorization allowed the aircraft to function, and she was seconds away from shutting it down. The atmosphere in JFK's Terminal 8 was a familiar symphony of chaos and privilege. It was the frantic beating heart of Transatlantic Airways' flagship operations, a place where time was money, and everyone seemed to be running out of both. Serafina Hayes, however, moved at her own pace. To the untrained eye, she was nobody. She wore simple dark grey Loro Piana cashmere joggers, a plain white t-shirt that likely cost more than the gate agent's monthly salary, and a pair of discreet logo-free trainers. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant functional bun. The only hint of her status was the PC Philippe watch on her wrist, its blue face subtle, and the heavy bespoke platinum band on her right ring finger. She carried no flashy purse, just a slim, hardened titanium laptop bag. She was the definition of stealth wealth, a ghost in the machine of ostentatious display. Serafina was tired. The past 72 hours had been a brutal negotiation in a midtown skyscraper, finalizing a Department of Defense contract for her company Helios Aerospace and Defense. Helios wasn't just a company. It was the company, the invisible architecture behind 80% of Western aviation navigation and cybersecurity. She was 34 years old, the youngest self-made black female billionaire in the world, and she was heading to London to secure the Skynet grid for all of Europe. She was flying commercial for a specific reason. This flight, Transatlantic 100, was the inaugural route for the brand new Boeing 7 Senua Senlesson X fleet, which was running the beta version of her Helios Skynet software. Her presence on the flight in seat 1A was a contractual obligation, a final systems integrity check she insisted on performing herself. She was, in essence, a very, very expensive mystery shopper. She bypassed the chaos of the flagship first lounge, opting instead to stand by the window, watching the ground crew service the massive gleaming new aircraft. She preferred the quiet observation to the forced pleasantries and clinking champagne glasses. That's when she first noticed them. "David, this is unacceptable." A woman's voice sliced through the terminal noise. "The champagne in there is Procco. They're passing off Procco as champagne." Can you believe the nerve? Serafina glanced over. The woman, perhaps in her late 50s, was a riot of logos. A Gucci monogrammed trench coat, a Louis Vuitton rolling bag, and a bright orange Hermes Birkin that she wielded like a weapon. Her face was tight, her blonde hair sprayed into a helmet. This was Carolyn Reed. Her husband, David Reed, looked exasperated, but defeated. "It's just a drink, Caroline. We'll be on the plane in 10 minutes. It's the Principal David. We paid $12,000 for these tickets. I expect champagne." Caroline's eyes scanned the boarding area and landed on Serafina. She looked her up and down, the joggers, the t-shirt, the simple bag. Caroline's lip curled in a barely perceptible sneer of dismissal. She saw a woman who didn't belong, who was probably flying economy and lingering too close to the first-class gate polluting the air. Serafina met her gaze, held it for a beat, and then simply looked back out the window. This was a background noise she had dealt with her entire life. It was tiresome, but not worth her energy. Boarding for Transatlantic 100 to London. Heathrow will now begin. We invite our concierge key and flagship first passengers to board at this time. Carolyn instantly transformed, plastering a saccharine smile on her face as she and David pushed to the front of the line, cutting off an elderly couple. Serafina sighed, retrieved her passport, and fell in line behind them. As they walked down the jet bridge, Carolyn was complaining again. "I told them I wanted 1A and 1B, David. They put us in 2A and 2B. It's an outrage. I'm going to speak to the purser. Sarafina, holding boarding pass 1A, felt a small, cold knot tighten in her stomach. This, she sensed, was about to become an inconvenience. The cabin of the new 7-Center 7X was spectacular. The flagship first suites were more like small hotel rooms with privacy doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch screens. Sarafina navigated the aisle to the very front of the aircraft seat 1A, the best seat on the plane offering privacy and a view, and Carolyn Reed was sitting in it. She had already thrown her Gucci coat onto the adjoining seat 1B and was busy arranging her Birkin on the console, her back to the aisle. Sarafina stopped. She waited politely. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice quiet but clear. Carolyn finished adjusting her bag before turning around, her smile vanishing the instant she saw Sarafina. "Yes, I believe you're in my seat," Sarafina said, simply holding up her boarding pass. "Hayes S seat 1A. Carolyn glanced at the boarding pass and let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound of genuine dismissive amusement. "Oh, honey, no, I don't think so. This is first class." Sarafina's expression did not change. "Yes, I am aware. This is my seat. 1A. "There must be some mistake," Carolyn said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're probably in cabin 10 row A. This is cabin 1. Why don't you go find one of the flight attendants? They can help you find where you actually belong." David Reed, who had just arrived, saw the confrontation. "Is there a problem?" "Honey, this woman," Carolyn said, waving a dismissive hand at Sarafina, "thinks this is her seat. She's confused." David, eager to be the problem solver, adopted a patronizing tone. "Mom, it's an easy mistake to make on these big planes. The economy cabin is that way," he said, pointing toward the back of the plane. The cold knot in Sarafina's stomach turned to ice. She had two options. She could unleash the storm she was capable of, or she could follow the process. She always preferred to follow the process first. It made the eventual outcome so much more devastating. "I am not confused," Sarafina stated, her voice losing its quiet warmth and becoming flat metallic. "This is seat 1A. My boarding pass says 1A. Your wife is in my seat. Please ask her to move." "Now listen here." Carolyn snapped, her polite facade cracking. "I'm not moving. I paid for a first-class experience, and I am not going to be harassed by someone who clearly snuck past the gate agent." "Flight attendant," she bellowed, mashing the call button. A flustered L-looking man in a sharp blue uniform rushed over. His name tag read, Mark. "What seems to be the problem, Mrs. Reed?" Mark asked, already recognizing her from the lounge. "This woman is harassing me," Carolyn declared, pointing at Sarafina. "She's insisting this is her seat and she's being very aggressive. I feel threatened. I want her removed." Mark turned to Sarafina. He performed the same visual calculation Carolyn had. Expensive blonde woman in 1A versus casually dressed black woman in the aisle. He made his choice in a nancond. "Mom," he said to Sarafina, not even asking for her boarding pass, "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so other passengers can board." "What seat are you supposed to be in?" "She is supposed to be in 1A, Sarafina said, holding out the pass. Mark barely looked at it. "Okay, well, there's clearly a computer glitch. Mrs. Reed is settled. Mum, I can offer you 5F. It's a lovely suite, also a window." "No," Sarafina said. The word was absolute. "I'm sorry." Mark blinked, unused to being refused. "I am not taking 5er. I am taking 1A. I am the confirmed passenger for this seat. This woman is a trespasser. Remove her." The other first-class passengers were now starting to stop and stare. The tension was thick. Carolyn gasped, clutching her pearls in mock horror. "A trespasser? Mark, did you hear that I'm being threatened and insulted? This is unacceptable. If she's not removed from this cabin, I will be filing a formal complaint against you and this airline." Mark's face hardened. He was trapped between a demanding high-value customer and a disruptive passenger. He made the wrong choice. "Mom," he said to Sarafina, his voice taking on a sharp, authoritative edge. "You are delaying the boarding of an international flight. I have given you a solution. If you do not accept seat 5F and clear the aisle, I will be forced to call security to have you deplaned." The threat hung in the air, deplaned. Serafina looked at Mark. She saw his weakness, his prejudice, his lazy assumptions. She looked at Carolyn, who was now smirking victorious. "You are making a catastrophic error in judgment, Mark," Serafina said, her voice a low vibration. "I will give you one final opportunity to do your job. Check your passenger manifest. Check it very carefully. Look up the name. Serafina Hayes. Then ask this woman to show you her boarding pass, which I guarantee says 2. "I don't need to check my manifest," Mark snapped. "I need you to move." "Very well," Serafina said. She stepped back, not into the aisle, but into the small galley area by the main door. She pulled out her phone. It was not an iPhone. It was a block of dark matte black metal, a Helios Secure Titan model, a device that didn't exist for the public. Carolyn scoffed. "What are you going to do? Call your lawyer. They can't help you when you're back in the terminal." Serafina ignored her. She speed dialed a single number. The call connected in 1/2 of one ring. She didn't raise her voice. She spoke calmly, clearly. "This is Serafina Hayes. Executive override. Authorized code. Cerberus null. Transatlantic 100. JFK T8. Ground the bird. I repeat, ground the bird. Systems integrity compromised. Pilot authorization is revoked. Effective immediately." She hung up for about 30 seconds. Nothing happened. Carolyn Reed rolled her eyes. "Oh, ground the bird." She mimicked in a childish voice. "What a lunatic. Mark, are you going to call security or not?" Mark reached for his intercom phone to do just that. And then it happened. The plane, which had been fully powered, its engines humming in a low, powerful whine as it prepared for pushback, suddenly went quiet. The massive turbine engines didn't just idle down. They spooled down completely, a dying, mournful sound that echoed through the cabin. The main cabin lights flickered shut off and then rebooted onto auxiliary power. The 24-in entertainment screens went black. A collective gasp went through the entire aircraft. On the intercom, a new voice laced with sudden, sharp panic crackled to life. It was Captain Miller from the cockpit. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We seem to have an unexpected, a critical systems failure. All navigation and engine controls have just been disabled remotely. We are fully grounded. We don't know what's going on. Please stay in your seats. This is not a drill. We are holding at the gate." Mark froze, his hand still on the intercom. His face went from flushed red to a sickly pale white. Carolyn Reed's smug expression finally faltered. What did she do?" David Reed looked at Serafina, who was standing perfectly still in the galley, her arms crossed. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. "Who are you?" Before Serafina could answer, the main cabin door, which had been sealed for departure, was unlatched with a loud, violent hiss. A gate agent, Maria, stumbled onto the plane, her face ashen, clutching an iPad. She wasn't looking for Mark. She wasn't looking for Carolyn. She was looking for Serafina. She locked eyes with the woman in the cashmere joggers. "Miss Hayes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, Miss Serafina Hayes." Serafina just nodded, her expression cold as diamond. Please, Maria stammered. We are receiving a red priority, 1 alert from the FAA Transatlantic Corporate and the Department of Defense. They say the aircraft's primary systems have been locked down with an executive override. They said it came from you." The pieces were clicking into place in Mark's head. Hayes. Serafina Hayes. He suddenly remembered the mandatory pre-flight briefing. The 797 FNX, the new software, the VVIP, the owner of the software. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. "That is correct," Maria Serafina said, her voice projecting effortlessly through the stunned silence of the first-class cabin. "My company, Helios Aerospace, owns the Skynet navigation system this entire Boeing fleet relies on. This specific flight, TA-100, is the final certification flight for a new software patch. My presence in Seat 1A is a non-negotiable term of the contract required for regulatory sign-off before transatlantic flight." I am not a passenger. I am the final flight readiness inspector. She turned her head, her gaze landing on Mark like a physical blow. And your employee Mark refused to verify my identity. He refused to look at my boarding pass. He threatened to have me removed from the aircraft. She then turned to Carolyn Reed. And this woman, Serafina, continued, her voice ringing with absolute authority, is in my seat, my federally mandated post. She refused to move. She accused me of being aggressive. She and your employee have together just breached a multi-billion-dollar contract, violated FAA regulations, and compromised the operational integrity of this flight. So yes, Maria, I grounded the plane, and it will not move fly or even power its engines until this situation is rectified to my precise satisfaction. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the fabric of Carolyn Reed's Gucci coat shifting as she trembled. Her face, which had been tight with smugness, had collapsed. She looked old and terrified. Then the real chaos began. Clear the jet bridge. Clear the bridge. Two men in dark, impeccably tailored suits stormed onto the plane. They were not airline employees. They were Serafina's personal security team, the shadows who always traveled 2 steps behind her. They had been waiting in the concierge lounge, and the Cerberus null alert had sent them sprinting. They flanked Serafina instantly, their eyes scanning the cabin. Behind them, a third man ran onto the plane, breathless, his tie undone, his face slick with sweat. He was Robert Chen, the president of North American operations for Transatlantic Airways. He was the most powerful airline executive in the country, and he looked like he had just seen a ghost. Serafina, he gasped, rushing past the security. Serafina, my God, what happened? My ops center just lit up. The Pentagon called my cell phone. The Pentagon. They said a Helios Cerberus protocol was triggered. Is it a hack? Are we under attack? Serafina looked at the panicked, powerful man. Hello, Robert. There is no hack. The threat is internal. She pointed one long, elegant finger at Carolyn Reed. This woman is in my seat. Robert Chen stopped. He looked at Carolyn. He looked at Serafina. He looked at the boarding pass in Serafina's hand. He looked at the terrified flight attendant, Mark. The entire horrifying multi-million-dollar picture snapped into focus. Yu Chen whispered to Mark, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost silent. You did this. Mark tried to speak. Sir, Mrs. Reed said, I didn't know. You didn't know. Chen finally roared, his voice exploding in the confined space. It's your job to know. It's your job to check the manifest. Her name is on every single high-priority document for this flight. We had a 5-page memo on Ms. Hayes' profile, her requirements, and the fact that she was not to be disturbed. I didn't read it. Mark stammered, his career evaporating before his eyes. Get off this plane, Chen said, his voice dropping back to that dangerous whisper. Not just the plane. Get out of this terminal. Your credentials are revoked. You are fired. If you are still here in 5 minutes, I will have the Port Authority arrest you for willful interference with flight operations. Mark stumbled backward, his face crumbling. He fled the aircraft, a disgraced man. Robert Chen then turned his attention to the Reeds. Carolyn Reed, seeing her ally gone, tried a different tactic. She burst into tears. It was a mistake, a simple mistake. This is crazy. You can't just fire people and ground planes over a seat. Madam Robert Chen said, his voice utterly devoid of sympathy. You are not just in a seat. You are in the one seat on this $400 million aircraft that by federal mandate and international treaty must be occupied by Ms. Hayes. You have not caused a customer service issue. You have created an international incident. He snapped his fingers at the gate agent. Maria, called Port Authority. Have these 2 passengers detained. Detained? David Reed finally spoke, his voice cracking. Now wait a second. That's uncalled for. We'll move. We'll move. See, we're moving. He frantically grabbed Carolyn's coat from 1B and started pulling on her arm. Get up, Caroline. Get up now. Oh, you're moving now, Serafina said. It was the first time she had spoken in minutes. Her voice cut through Carolyn's fake sobs. "You'll move when the man in the suit tells you to, but not when the black woman with the valid boarding pass does. How predictable." Carolyn froze, the word black hanging in the air. The subtext of the entire encounter was now the text. I'm not. This has nothing to do with." Carolyn sputtered. "This has everything to do with it." Serafina said, "You looked at me and you decided I was not worthy of this seat. You assumed I didn't belong. You leveraged your privilege and your skin color to bully a flight attendant into backing your play. You didn't see a billionaire CEO. You didn't see the one person holding the keys to the entire aircraft. You saw a black woman in joggers. And your prejudice just cost you everything. Port Authority is on the way." Mr. Chen Maria said, her hand over her phone. Mr. and Mrs. agreed. Chen said formally, "You are hereby banned for life from Transatlantic Airways and all our partner airlines. Your bags are being removed from the hold as we speak. You will be escorted from the terminal by police." "This is insane." David Reed shouted, his face purple. We'll sue you. We'll sue her." Serafina's security detail, a large man named Alex, stepped forward. "Sir, I suggest you lower your voice and comply." As the Port Authority officers appeared at the end of the jet bridge, David and Carolyn Reed finally understood it was over. The removal of the Reeds was a quiet, humiliating spectacle. The other first-class passengers who had been watching in stunned silence, many of them filming on their phones, did not look away. This was the perp walk of the privileged. Carolyn, her face a mask of tear-streaked makeup and disbelief, was led off the plane first. David followed, his head down, clutching their expensive carry-ons. As they passed Serafina, who stood unmoved in the galley, Carolyn couldn't help herself. She had to have the last venomous word. You bitch," she hissed, her voice low. "You think you're so important? You've ruined our vacation. You've ruined everything. You'll pay for this." Serafina didn't flinch. She simply looked at the woman and said, "No, Carolyn, you paid for this. You just didn't realize the price." The officers led them away. The door was sealed again. The cabin was silent save for the nervous energy of the remaining passengers and the frantic whispering of the airline staff. Robert Chen looked at Serafina, his face a complex mask of apology and raw panic. "Serafina, Ms. Hayes, I cannot apologize enough. This is the single worst service failure in the history of this airline. The crew mark his bias was inexcusable. It is," Serafina agreed. "And inexcusable is going to be a very, very expensive word for you today, Robert." "Anything," Chen said immediately. "Whatever you want, whatever Helios needs. Do you want my private jet? I can have a Gulfstream G700 ready in 20 minutes. You don't have to stay here." Serafina shook her head. "No. If I take a private jet, the data logging from the Helios system fails. The certification for this route is voided. This plane must make this flight and I must be on it." She walked past him, her footsteps echoing in the cabin, and finally arrived at seat 1A. She brushed a non-existent piece of dust from the leather. She placed her titanium laptop bag on the console. She had waited for this. She had earned this. "So, here's what's going to happen, Robert," she said, not looking at him, but at the crew. "First, you are going to find a new flight crew, the A-Team. I don't want anyone on this flight who feels conflicted. I want your best. Done," Chen said, already speaking into his phone. "I'm pulling the London diplomat crew from the 900 p.m. They're on their way." Second, Serafina continued, "You are going to have Captain Miller come out of that cockpit. He is going to stand right here, and he is going to apologize to me for his crew's failure to maintain federal protocol. And then he is going to apologize to every single passenger on this plane for the delay that his airline's prejudice caused." Immediately, Chen said, nodding to Maria, who ran to the cockpit. And third, Serafina said, her voice dropping, "This delay, this 2-hour-plus grounding, it's going to cost you. My company Helios has a zero-fail clause in our contract. This was a failure. My legal team will be calculating the damages, but more importantly, every single passenger on this plane, from first class to the last row of economy, will be compensated. Full flight refund and 100,000 frequent flyer miles each. Jen didn't even blink. Consider it done. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit, his hat in his hands. He was a veteran pilot, and he looked profoundly ashamed. He stood in the aisle and addressed Sarafina first. "Ms. Hayes, on behalf of the flight crew, I offer my deepest apologies. What happened was a failure of our training, our procedures, and our basic human decency. It will not happen again." He then turned on the PA system. His voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. As you know, we have had a significant operational delay. I want to be transparent with you. This delay was not due to a mechanical issue. It was due to a service failure on our part. A passenger, a VVIP passenger, crucial to the very operation of this aircraft, was denied her rightful seat and treated unacceptably by our staff. That staff member has been removed. We are waiting on a new crew, and we will be airborne as soon as possible. Transatlantic Airways has failed you and has failed Ms. Hayes. As compensation, your entire flight will be refunded by the airline." A murmur, then a wave of applause rippled through the plane. It was justice, and it was compensation. Sarafina finally sat down and won. She stretched out her legs. It was indeed a very comfortable seat. The new flight crew arrived, a crisp professional team who greeted Sarafina with the difference of soldiers addressing a 5-star general. The new purser, a woman named Jessica, approached her. "Miss Hayes," she said, her voice warm but respectful. "We are honored to have you. Can I get you a pre-aperture?" "Anything Dom Perignon P2, a 30-year Macallan. Just water," Sarafina said. "For now, and Jessica, thank you. Let's have a smooth flight." As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Sarafina pulled out her Titan device. She entered a 30-digit alphanumeric code. In the cockpit, Captain Miller saw his dashboard light up. "Systems online. Helios Skynet is active. All controls are restored." He turned to his co-pilot. "Let's fly this plane." The intercom clicked on. "This is Captain Miller. We are finally cleared for takeoff. Our flight time to London will be 6 hours and 15 minutes. Sit back, relax, and thank you for your patience." As the massive Boeing 7 Sensei Lex thundered down the runway and lifted into the night sky, Sarafina allowed herself a small, grim smile. The first battle was won. But for Carolyn and David Reed, the war was just beginning. The passengers who had filmed the encounter were not bound by any airline confidentiality. By the time TA-100 was over the Atlantic, the videos were on TikTok, Twitter, X, and Instagram. The first video, titled "Karen Gets Banned for Life for Stealing Seat," hit 1 million views in an hour. The second racist passenger doesn't realize she's messing with the woman who owns the plane hit 5 million. By morning, Carolyn Reed was the NA1 trending topic in the world. The internet, with its terrifying decentralized power, did what it does best. She was identified. David Reed was identified. His employer, Vidian Bank, a major financial institution that prided itself on diversity and inclusion, was tagged thousands of times per minute. When Sarafina Hayes landed at Heathrow, she was met on the jet bridge not by her car service, but by Robert Chen's London-based counterpart, who informed her of the news. "The Reeds are there finished, Ms. Hayes," the executive told her. Vidian Bank issued a statement this morning. "David Reed has been terminated effective immediately for conduct not reflective of their corporate values. Their country club in Greenwich has suspended their membership, the charity board Carolyn sat on. She was asked to resign." This was the hard karma. It wasn't just about being kicked off a flight. It was the complete and total dismantling of the public life they had built on a foundation of unearned arrogance. They hadn't just lost a seat. They had lost their status, their income, and their reputation. All because they couldn't stand to see a black woman in first class. As for Mark, the flight attendant, his story was a quieter but no less devastating end. He was blacklisted. The FAA, upon receiving the report from Transatlantic and Helios, had opened an investigation into his conduct. He would never work in aviation again. He had placed his casual prejudice above his professional duty, and the cost was his entire career. The flight to London was flawless. The service was perfect. Jessica and her crew were the epitome of professionalism. Sarafina worked for 2 hours, signing off on the final diagnostics of the Skynet system, the data streaming perfectly from the engines and navigation arrays to her secure server. The 7 nanism was performing beautifully. After finishing her work, she ate a light meal, watched a film, and then reclined her seat into a fully flat bed. For the first time in days, she slept. She woke as the plane was descending over the green fields of England. The sun was rising, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, peaceful morning. As the plane taxied to the gate at Heathrow, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert Chen. "Landed safely, I trust. The fallout here is significant. Our stock took a 2% dip this morning on the news, but the story is turning positive. Transatlantic sides with black CEO fires racist employee. The PR team loves it. The refund is processing again. My apologies." Sarafina typed a short reply. "The system is certified, Robert. That's what matters. Send me the bill for the passenger refunds. Helios will cover it. Consider it a training expense." She put her phone away. She was the first to depain. As she stepped into the terminal, her security team flanking her, she walked past the gate for the return flight to JFK. A new crew was preparing, a new set of passengers lining up. The machine kept moving. She had been tested. She had been disrespected. But she hadn't yelled. She hadn't screamed. She had simply and calmly exerted the power she had spent a lifetime building. She had met their loud, ugly prejudice with a quiet, structural, and absolute power. Carolyn Reed had tried to make her small, to put her in the back of the bus, to deny her a place she had more than earned. But Sarafina Hayes didn't just belong in seat 1A, she owned the air it flew through. And as she walked out into the London morning, ready to close her next deal, she knew one thing for sure. The view from the top, the one she had built for herself, was worth the fight. The sun rising over London did nothing to warm Sarafina Hayes. She sat in the back of a blacked-out Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding through the morning traffic toward the city. The car was a silent leather and wood sanctuary, but her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. The TA-100 incident was not a victory. It was a distraction, a necessary but time-consuming diversion from her actual mission, the complete integration of the European Skynet grid. Her destination was a glass and steel monolith, the headquarters of Alistair Croft Holdings, the parent company of the UK's primary aviation authority. The meeting was with Lord Alistair Croft himself, a man whose lineage could be traced back to the Norman conquest, and who she knew viewed her as little more than a talented upstart from the colonies. She entered the 80th floor boardroom precisely at 9W. The room was dominated by a 40-foot mahogany table. At the far end sat Lord Croft, flanked by his board of directors, a sea of grey hair, grey suits, and stern centuries-old entitlement. M.M. Hayes. Croft said, his voice a smooth, aristocratic baritone. He did not stand. "You've had a turbulent journey," I read. A faint smile played on his lips. The news was already here. He found it amusing. Lord Croft Sarafina replied, taking her seat. A team of 2 lawyers and 1 engineer sat with her. "My journey was efficient. The turbulence, as you call it, was merely a necessary systems test. It proved unequivocally that Helios controls its assets, which is why we are here." A younger board member, a man named Nigel Fitzwilliam, scoffed. "Yes, we read the reports. Rather a dramatic display grounding an entire aircraft over a seating squabble. It seems a bit theatrical, wouldn't you say? A bit American." The air in the room chilled. Sarafina's engineer tensed. Her lawyer subtly cleared his throat. Sarafina did not look at Nigel. She kept her eyes locked on Lord Croft. "Mr. If it's William seems to be operating under the same delusion as the transatlantic flight attendant," she said, her voice soft, but carrying the lethal precision of a scalpel. "The delusion that this was about a seat. It was not." She leaned forward. "It was about a contractual, federally mandated post vital for a multi-billion-dollar system certification. It was about an employee who, through willful prejudice, attempted to override a federal protocol. It was about a security breach. My response was not theatrical, Mr. Fitzwilliam. It was the only response. I protected my asset, my contract, and the safety of the 300 passengers on that plane whose navigation system was at that moment uncertified. She paused, letting the weight of the word uncertified land. It was an aviation executive's nightmare. The TA-100 incident, she continued, was a perfect real-world demonstration of what Helios provides. Absolute control. When our protocols are breached, we lock down instantly globally. The system you are about to license from me, Lord Croft, is the very same one. It will not bow to entitled passengers, lazy employees, or skeptical board members. Nigel Fitzwilliam's face had gone a blotchy, mottled red. Lord Croft, however, suddenly looked at Seraphina with new, sharp respect. He had seen a petulant child. He now saw a queen. The amusement was gone. The Skynet grid, Seraphina said, pressing her advantage, will control every flight path, every runway, every radar tower from Heathrow to Helsinki. The contract on this table gives you access to it, but it gives me the kill switch. She smiled a thin, cold expression. I suggest you ask yourselves, who do you trust more to hold it? Me or a man like Mr. Fitzwilliam, who can't tell the difference between a seating squabble and a multinational security protocol? Croft held her gaze for a long 10 seconds. Then he broke into a dry, rasping laugh. My apologies, Miss Hayes. It seems we were the ones who misidentified the power in this room. He tapped the contract. Let's talk about the accelerated timeline. I want Skynet fully operational by Q2. Seraphina had won. The rest of the meeting was a formality thousands of miles away in Greenwich, Connecticut. The reality of that power was crashing down like a physical force. The home of David and Carolyn Reed was under siege not by a mob, but by the silent, relentless judgment of their peers. The long driveway of their 12,000 QFT Georgian mansion was blocked by a Channel 4 news van. A reporter, Sarah Jenkins, was doing a live stand-up from their gate. And in a story that has gripped the nation, Greenwich residents David and Carolyn Reed are now facing a firestorm of public outrage. Sources confirmed David Reed was terminated this morning from his senior VP position at Vidian Bank, the bank's stock. Inside the house was deathly quiet. A $10,000 vase lay shattered on the marble floor. Carolyn Reed, her helmet of blonde hair in disarray, her face stained with ruined mascara, was sitting on a priceless antique sofa, shaking. David stood by the window, his back to her, clutching a tumbler of whiskey. It was 10 a.m. You, he whispered, his voice with venom. This is you. Your arrogance, your need to always be right, to always put people in their place. Me, Carolyn shrieked, her voice cracking. I was defending us. I was defending our status. You just stood there. You let that woman talk to me like that. You let her ruin us. We'll sue. You said you're a coward, David. Sue David laughed. A broken, ugly sound. I just got off the phone with Arthur Vance, our lawyer. He said if we try to sue Transatlantic, and this Helios company will counter-sue us into oblivion. Interference with a flight crew, contractual damages, FAA violations. He said, we're lucky we weren't arrested on the jet bridge. He turned to face her. His face, a mask of purple rage and despair. It's over, Carolyn. Do you understand me? Over. My severance is voided. They're claiming termination for cause. My stock options are gone. The club called. Our membership is revoked. The charity gala. We've been disinvited, but they're our friends. Carolyn whimpered, the reality finally penetrating her bubble of privilege. The Hendersons, the Lawrence. They're not our friends. David roared, throwing his glass against the stone fireplace. It exploded. They're associates, and we are now toxic. We are the racist couple from the plane. We are a meme, Carolyn. My son called from Princeton. His fraternity is reviewing his membership. All because you couldn't just sit in 2A. It was the principal. She sobbed. The principal, he spat. The principal just cost us our entire life. The principal just cost us everything. The house phone rang loud in the silence. They both stared at it. It rang again and again. Finally, the answering machine picked up. A smooth, professional voice filled the room. Mr. and Mrs. Reed, this is Jonathan Pierce from the legal firm of Scatter and ARBs, representing Helios Aerospace and Defense. I am calling to inform you that we will be filing a civil suit against you for damages totaling $488,000. Carolyn fainted. The voice continued cold and dispassionate. This amount represents the full itemized cost of the 304 passenger refunds for flight TA-100, which our client Ms. Serafina Hayes graciously covered on behalf of Transatlantic Airways to compensate for the delay you caused. We have also included the cost of the replacement flight crew and the associated FAA non-compliance penalties. A server will be at your residence this afternoon. We expect payment in full within 30 days to avoid asset seizure. Have a wonderful day. David Reed slowly sank to the floor, his legs giving out. He stared at his unconscious wife. It wasn't just a loss of status. It was financial ruin. Serafina Hayes hadn't just grounded a plane. She had taken a wrecking ball to the foundation of their lives. The collateral damage spread. In a small walk-up apartment in Queens, Mark, the former flight attendant, was sitting on a threadbare sofa. His old uniform folded neatly in a box. His face was in his hands. He had just come from a meeting with his union representative. The news was blunt. I can't help you, Mark. You're radioactive. Transatlantic is citing willful endangerment and gross dereliction of duty. You didn't just break a service rule, you broke a federal rule. You ignored a documented VVIP security protocol. The FAA has pulled your certification. You're done. Not just a transatlantic. You're blacklisted. You'll never serve on a US-flagged carrier again. Mark looked up, his eyes red. But I was trying to de-escalate. That woman, Mrs. Reed, she was so demanding. I made a judgment call. His rep, a tired woman named Linda, sighed. You didn't make a judgment call, Mark. You made an assumption. You saw a rich white woman and a black woman in sweats, and you sided with the rich white woman. You didn't check the pass. You didn't check the manifest. You threatened the one person on the plane you couldn't threaten. You took the easy way out and it cost you your career. Mark thought about his last 15 years. The layovers in Paris, the long hauls to Tokyo. It was the only life he knew. And it was over. All because he hadn't bothered to read a memo. All because he hadn't bothered to look past his own lazy ingrained bias. The weight of his simple mistake was crushing. Back in the skies somewhere over the Atlantic, Serafina Hayes was on her way home. She was not on a commercial flight. She was in the cream and walnut cabin of a Helios-owned Gulfstream G700. The flight was silent fast and exactly to her specifications. The London deal was signed. The European grid was hers, and the TA-100 incident was now just paperwork. Her secure Titan phone buzzed. It was Robert Chen Serafina. His voice was warmer, less panicked. The board meeting finished. It was unanimous. We are officially announcing the Helios Protocol, our new mandatory amphibious and situational awareness training program for all 100,000 transatlantic employees from the baggage handlers to the cockpit. Good, Serafina said, sipping a glass of water. We are retaining Dr. for Alana Washington's consulting firm to design it as you suggested. You were right. Her work on implicit bias is groundbreaking. This is going to change our entire corporate culture for the better. You've actually done us a favor in a very painful way. Progress is often painful, Robert. One last thing, Chen said, a hint of awe in his voice. We got a copy of the demand letter your lawyers sent to the Reeds for the full refund amount. You really did that? I did, Serafina said simply. My company covered the cost to make the passengers whole. That was an act of integrity. But justice requires that the guilty party pay the debt. My legal team will collect that Robert is an act of accountability. Understood, he said. Well, safe flight, Miss Hayes, and thank you. He hung up. Serafina looked out the window. The sky was a deep, dark, endless blue. She thought about Carolyn Reed's sneer. She thought about Mark's dismissive hand wave. She thought about Mr. Fitzwilliam's condescending scoff. They were all pieces of the same tired old machine, a machine that ran on assumptions and prejudice. But Serafina Hayes was a builder, and she was building a new machine. It was a machine of cold, hard logic, of indisputable power, and of absolute accountability. It was a machine that was fair, but unforgiving. As the jet streaked across the sky, she closed her eyes. The incident was over. The point was made. The perpetrators were broken, and she was, as always, already focused on the next target. The Gulfstream G700 descended through a dark, clear New York sky. Its engines a whisper compared to the commercial roar of the 77. They were landing not at a commercial terminal, but at the private FBO fixed base operator at JFK. A world of quiet hangars and black cars waiting directly on the tarmac. Serafina Hayes had not rested. Her laptop was open, displaying not flight telemetry, but a curated digest from her head of communications. The story of TA100 had metastasized. She was no longer just a billionaire CEO. She was a symbol. She scanned the highlights with a cool, analytical detachment. Media requests Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, Vogue, and, predictably, Oprah, all requesting exclusive interviews about the JFK incident. Social media. Serafina Hayes was a global trend. She was an icon of black female empowerment. TikToks used audio of the captain's apology over videos of young women getting promotions or standing up to disrespectful bosses. She had become, in the parliament of the internet, the main character. The backlash a predictable vocal minority. Op-eds in conservative papers decried cancel culture and the ruthless, disproportionate response. Comment sections were filled with arguments defending the Reeds, calling Serafina arrogant and unforgiving. Serafina closed the laptop. The noise, both positive and negative, was irrelevant. The opinions of strangers were variables she could not and would not try to control. She cared about results, not reviews. The Reeds had breached protocol. The flaw in the system was marked. The consequences were mathematical. Justice in her world was just a balanced equation. The jet's wheels kissed the tarmac with barely a bump. It taxied to a stop beside a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Cullinan. Alex, her head of security, opened the cabin door. "Welcome home, Ms. Hayes. The car's ready. No media present." Good, Serafina said, gathering her single titanium bag. She descended the stairs onto the cool tarmac. The air smelled of jet fuel and the distant city. As she walked the 50 FT toward the car, a private hangar door rolled open and a baggage tug driven by a ground crew worker slowed to let her pass. The driver, a young black woman in a greased high-visibility vest, stopped the tug. She saw Alex. She saw the jet. And then she saw Serafina. Their eyes locked. The young woman, her name tag read. Kesha didn't smile. She didn't wave. Her face was etched with the exhaustion of a double shift. But in her eyes, Serafina saw something she hadn't seen in the boardroom with Lord Croft, or in the panicked face of Robert Chen. She saw recognition. She saw vindication. Kesha gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of profound, unspoken respect. It was a nod that said, "I see what you did. I know why you did it, and thank you." Serafina Hayes, who had met the fury of Carolyn Reed and the arrogance of Nigel Fitzwilliam with an impenetrable wall of ice, paused. She looked at Kesha, and for the first time she let the mask slip just a fraction. She returned the nod, crisp, professional and absolute. In that one silent exchange, the true meaning of the incident settled. The Reeds were forgotten. The money was irrelevant. This was the echo. This was the proof that her power, her fight, was not just for her. It was a shield for every car in the world who couldn't ground the plane. Serafina got into the rolls. The door closed with a silent bank vault thud. "Where to, Ms. Hayes?" the driver asked. "The office," Serafina said, her voice flat. "All business once more. We have work to do." The story of Serafina Hayes and Carolyn Reed isn't just about a stolen seat. It's a powerful reminder that prejudice and arrogance carry a heavy price. In our world, too many people are judged by what they look like, not who they are. They are dismissed, disrespected, and underestimated. But karma, as they say, has a way of balancing the books. In this case, it was delivered not with a shout, but with the deafening silence of a grounded 727 and the complete public collapse of a life built on hate. What did you think of Serafina's ultimate revenge? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, and you want to see more real-life karma and powerful stories of justice, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for new videos every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a single moment of karma in action.